She is dying, and you are standing there counting silverware. Rosa screamed it across the marble dining room, her voice cracking, her hands covered in a 7-year-old girl's vomit, and not one person in that room full of tailored suits and diamond earrings moved a single inch. Sophia Caron lay collapsed across her birthday cake, lips turning blue, while her own grandmother slowly set down a crystal wine glass and said with perfect, terrible calm, "She has a sensitive stomach. This always passes." That was the moment Rosa Delgado understood. This wasn't passing. This was planned. Subscribe now. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The little girl had asked for only one thing that birthday. Not the white 3-tiered cake. Not the white roses suffocating every surface of the dining room. Not the crystal glasses or the string quartet that played in the hall, until Donna Elena waved them away because the music was giving her a headache. Sophia Caron had asked in the small, careful voice she used when she wanted something badly enough to risk asking for it. She had asked for her father to be home by 6. It was 7:43 when Rosa heard the first sound from the dining room. She had been in the kitchen loading the dessert plates, stacking them with the precision Chef Arnaud required, edges aligned and no fingerprints on the rim when she heard it. Not a crash, not a scream. Something worse than both, a silence that replaced sound. The sudden absence of the grandmother's controlled murmur and the soft scrape of Sophia's fork against china. Rosa set the plate down. She walked to the doorway. Sophia was still seated upright, which was the only reason Rosa didn't run immediately. But her small hands were flat on the tablecloth pressing down hard, and her face had gone the color of old candle wax, that yellow-white. That means the blood has left somewhere it should have stayed, and her dark eyes were fixed on a point in the middle distance that had nothing in it. "Sophia," Rosa said. The child turned her head slowly, like movement cost something. "I don't feel," Sophia started, and then she went forward. Rosa crossed the room in 4 steps and caught her before her face hit the plate. She pulled the girl against her chest and felt the heat radiating off of her. Not a fever heat, something different, something chemical and wrong, and felt the way Sophia's small fingers gripped her uniform sleeve with a strength that was pure animal panic. "I've got you," Rosa said right against her ear. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Behind her, Donna Elena said, "You're going to crease her dress." Rosa turned around. She looked at the old woman. Donna Elena Caron, 71 years old, silver hair pinned without a single strand out of place, pearls at her throat that cost more than Rosa's car. She was sitting with her hands folded on the tablecloth and her expression arranged into something that was technically concern, but had no feeling behind it, the face of a woman performing an emotion she had stopped actually having a long time ago. "Call an ambulance," Rosa said. "It's a sensitive stomach. She needs to lie down and..." Her lips are blue. Rosa turned Sophia sideways on her lap, pressing 2 fingers to the girl's neck. Pulse rapid, shallow, erratic. "Her pulse is wrong. Call an ambulance right now or I will throw your phone through that window and scream for help from the street." The 3 suited men by the wall exchanged glances. Donna Elena said, "You are a housekeeper." "I am a housekeeper who knows what poisoning looks like," Rosa said. The word landed in the room like something thrown. Nobody breathed. Then one of the suited men, the younger one, the one Rosa had always privately thought had a conscience, he was fighting hard to suppress, reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Donna Elena said sharply, "Put that away." The young man looked at Rosa. He looked at Sophia, who had gone frighteningly still. He dialed. The ambulance took 11 minutes. Rosa counted every one of them. She sat on the marble floor with Sophia in her arms and talked to her the whole time. Not about anything. Just words, a continuous low stream of words to give the child something to follow, back to consciousness. "You're okay, I'm here. Your dad is coming. I promise you're okay, stay with me. That's it, good girl. I've got you." And she felt Sophia's grip on her sleeve loosen once and tightened her own arms in response and said louder, "No, stay here, don't you go anywhere." Sophia's eyes fluttered open. "Rosa," she whispered, "right here." "Am I dying?" "Absolutely not," Rosa said with a certainty she was building out of nothing but willpower. "You're going to the hospital and they're going to fix you up, and when your dad gets here, I'm going to tell him you were very brave." Was I brave? Sophia asked, and her voice was so small and so sincere and so heartbreakingly hopeful that Rosa felt something inside her chest tighten like a fist. The bravest? Rosa said. The absolute bravest. Behind her, she heard Donna Elena say quietly to one of the men, "Find out who she called before she got here today." Rosa filed that away. She kept talking to Sophia. She did not turn around. In the ambulance, the paramedic tried to take Sophia's hand, and Sophia reached for Rosa instead. The paramedic looked at Rosa. "You family," Rosa didn't hesitate. Yes, it wasn't a lie she told herself, not the kind that matters. Sophia fell asleep somewhere between the estate gates and the hospital entrance. Her face slack and pale against Rosa's shoulder, her birthday dress smeared with frosting and something darker that Rosa didn't want to think about yet. Rosa sat very still and let the child sleep and looked at nothing and thought about the things she had said in the dining room. "I know what poisoning looks like." She hadn't planned to say it. It had come out the way true things sometimes do, without permission, without the filter that self-preservation usually requires. And now it was out in the world and it couldn't be taken back. And everyone in that room had heard it, and Donna Elena had heard it, and Rosa had approximately 4 hours before someone in that house decided she was a problem. She needed to think very fast. The ER doctor was young and tired and had the particular resigned confidence of someone who had already worked 14 hours. He took Sophia's vitals, reviewed her chart. Rosa had asked the paramedic to pull it, and the paramedic, bless him, had, and then looked up with an expression that was professionally neutral, but had something sharper running underneath it. "This is the 4th time this child has been admitted here," he said. 12 total, Rosa said. The other 8 were at Mercy General. Her grandmother rotates the hospitals. She said it like a fact because it was a fact, and she watched the doctor's face change as he processed it. "You're the mother, housekeeper, and you know her hospital rotation." "I know everything that happens in that house," Rosa said, "and I need you to run a full tox panel on her, not just the standard screen, everything, and I need you to document it separately from her regular chart." She paused. "And I need you to know that if anything happens to me in the next 48 hours, it's because of what I just told you." The doctor stared at her for a long moment. "What is your name?" he asked. "Rosa Delgado." She spelled it. "Please write it down." He wrote it down. Sophia was asleep in the hospital bed, looking smaller than a 7-year-old child had any right to look, when the door opened and the room changed. Marco Carone didn't announce himself. He never did. He simply entered a space, and that space reorganized itself around him. The air pressure shifted, the light seemed to calculate his position, and every person in the room became acutely aware of where they were standing in relation to where he was. He was still in his suit from whatever meeting had kept him from his daughter's birthday. He had not loosened the tie. His eyes went immediately to Sophia, and for one unguarded second, one single second, before the walls went back up, Rosa saw the devastation on his face, raw and complete, and so unlike every other expression she had ever seen him wear, that it was almost disorienting. He crossed the room. He took Sophia's hand. He bent his head and said something against her fingers, too quiet for Rosa to hear. Then he straightened, and he looked at Rosa, and he was someone else again. "You rode with her," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Why?" "Because she was scared," Rosa said. "And she asked for me." Something crossed his face. "She asked for my shim." "Yes, sir." He studied her the way expensive people study things they haven't decided the value of yet. "My mother says you made a scene." "Your mother says a lot of things," Rosa said, and then stopped, because that was too far, and she knew it, and she could see from the slight change in his expression that he knew it too. She looked at her hands. "I apologize. That was disrespectful." "It was honest," Marco said, "which in this family is considerably more dangerous." He turned back to Sophia. "The doctor says food allergy." "The doctor is running a full toxicology panel," Rosa said carefully, "at my request." The silence that followed had texture. Marco did not turn around. His shoulders moved a breath, controlled and deliberate. When he finally looked at her again, his face was completely unreadable. "At your request," he repeated. "Yes, sir." "On what basis?" Rosa thought about the jar, about the white powder, about the dates she had memorized, the patterns she had tracked, the one terrible fact she had been carrying alone for months because she didn't know who to take it to, and she wasn't sure anyone would believe a housekeeper over a grandmother. She said this is the 12th time in 11 months. Every time she gets sick, the food is different. If it were an allergy, we'd have found the trigger by now, and she stopped. Finish it, Marco said, and his voice was very quiet. Every single time she's been sick, you've been away from the house. The clock on the wall ticked. Once. Twice. Every time, Marco said. I kept a record. In my head, 11 months. She held his gaze. I can recite them if you want. The dates, what she ate, where you were. Marco Carone turned fully to face her, and something in the quality of his attention changed, sharpened, focused, became the kind of focus that Rosa understood instinctively was both her protection and her greatest danger. Recite them, he said. So she did. She stood in that hospital room beside her employer's daughter's bed and recited 11 dates from memory, the food, the symptoms, the estimated timing, his location each time, and she watched his face go through something she had no name for, something that was beneath the surface of him, the way seismic things move invisible and enormous. When she finished, he was silent for a very long time. Then he said, "Who else have you told this to?" "The doctor," Rosa said. "Tonight, no one before that." "Why not before?" She looked at him steadily. "Because I wasn't sure who I could trust." "And you trust me." "I trust," Rosa said carefully, "that you love your daughter." Something happened in his eyes. Not softness exactly. More like recognition, the specific shock of hearing a truth you've been careful not to say out loud. He nodded once, turned back to Sophia, pulled the chair close, and sat down. "Go home," he said. "Get some sleep." A pause. "A car will pick you up at 8 tomorrow." Rosa nodded. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. "Mr. Carone." The jar in the kitchen. 3 weeks ago, I didn't see what was in it." She kept her voice flat, factual. "But I think you should ask someone to find it." She left before he could respond. She walked down the hospital corridor and did not look back and did not let herself feel anything yet because there would be time for that later, and right now she needed every resource she had. In the elevator alone, she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes and let herself shake for exactly 10 seconds. Then she straightened up. The doors opened. She walked out into the night. She didn't go straight home. She walked 3 blocks to a 24-hour pharmacy, not the one near her apartment, a different one where nobody knew her face, and she bought a small notebook and a cheap pen, and she sat down at the bus stop outside and began writing before the receipt had even cooled in her hand. Everything she knew. Everything she'd seen. Every date, every detail, every overheard word, every moment she had dismissed as nothing and now understood to be something. She wrote it in the shorthand she'd developed over years of working in households where you were invisible and therefore saw everything quick, compressed, indecipherable to anyone who didn't know her system. She wrote about the jar. She wrote about Donna Elena's hand. She wrote about the pattern. And then she stopped and looked at what she'd written and felt the full weight of it settle onto her shoulders for the first time, not as a suspicion, not as a nagging thought, but as a fact. A fact with edges and mass in the specific gravity of something that changes everything. Someone was poisoning Sophia Carone. Someone who lived in that house. Someone with access to the kitchen. Someone who knew Marco's schedule down to the day, who could time each incident for his absence, who had the patience and the nerve to do it slowly enough that 11 different doctors over 11 months had called it a sensitive stomach and moved on. Someone who sat at the head of that birthday table with her pearls and her composure and said, "This always passes," while a 7-year-old turned blue. Rosa closed the notebook, looked at the street. A cab went by. A couple walked past arguing in low, tired voices about money. A man in a delivery uniform was locking up a restaurant 2 doors down. Normal. All of it normal. And somewhere across the city, in a house with marble floors and white roses going brown at the edges, a very dangerous old woman was figuring out what to do about a housekeeper who had seen too much. Rosa put the notebook in the inside pocket of her coat close to her body, where she'd feel it, and stood up. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Be careful what you say tomorrow. There are people in that house who report to more than one boss. She read it twice. Type back, who is this? 3 dots appeared. Pulsed. Disappeared. The dots came back, disappeared again. Then someone who doesn't want you to end up like the last housekeeper. Rosa stood very still on the sidewalk. She typed, what happened to the last housekeeper? This time the dots didn't come back. The number went cold. Rosa put the phone in her pocket, buttoned her coat, and began the walk home. She didn't sleep that night, but she was ready at 7:50 when the black car pulled up outside her building. She was standing at the curb with her notebook in her inside pocket and her hands steady in the kind of quiet that lives at the very center of a storm, still clear and completely, utterly committed. The driver didn't speak. She got in. The car moved through the morning city and Rosa watched the streets go by, and she thought about a 7-year-old girl who had asked only to have her father home by 6. And she thought about what she was going to do to make sure that little girl lived long enough to ask for something again. End of part 1. The car stopped in front of the Corona Estate at 8:04 in the morning, and Rosa noticed immediately that something was different. The front gate, which normally required a key card and 30 seconds of camera verification, was already open. 2 men she had never seen before stood on either side of the entrance, not the usual security, not the men she passed every morning in the hallway. These were different, older, still in a way that only comes from years of professional violence. The driver said nothing. He simply parked. Rosa got out, smoothed her coat, and walked through the gate. Inside the house had been rearranged without moving a single piece of furniture. That was the only way she could describe it. Everything was in the same place it had always been. The console table, the vase of white lilies that got changed every Tuesday, the portrait of Marco's father on the east wall. But the air in the rooms had a different quality, tighter, pressurized, like the atmosphere before a storm that hasn't announced itself yet. A man she recognized as Nico, Marco's personal assistant, met her at the entrance to the main hall. Mr. Caron is in the study, Nico said. He asked that you go directly. Is Sophia still at the hospital, stable? He paused and added quieter. She asked for you this morning when she woke up. Rosa absorbed that. She followed Nico down the corridor. Outside the study door, Nico stopped. Miss Delgado? He kept his voice very low. Whatever he asks you in there, answer it straight. He already knows more than you think he does. Rosa looked at him. That sounds like a warning. It's advice, Nico said. There's a difference. He knocked twice on the door and stepped back. Marco's voice from inside, come in. She went in. Marco was standing behind his desk, which meant he hadn't slept either. People who have slept sit down. He had his jacket off his sleeves rolled to the elbow, and he was holding a photograph, holding it the way people hold things they are not sure what to do with, loosely at an angle like it might still tell him something different if he kept looking at it. He set it face down when she entered. Sit down, he said. She sat. He didn't. He walked around to the front of the desk and leaned against it, and the distance between them was close enough that Rosa could see the particular exhaustion in his face, not the tiredness of a long night, but the older, deeper exhaustion of a man who had spent years managing a world that required him to trust no one, and had just discovered that the danger was not outside his walls. The tox panel came back, he said. Rosa's hands folded in her lap tightened without her meaning them to. And thallium, he said, trace amounts, small enough to produce the symptoms we've been seeing: nausea, fatigue, neurological disruption, without triggering a fatal response. Small enough to look like illness. His voice was perfectly level. It's the kind of dosing that someone with patience uses. Someone who isn't trying to kill quickly. Rosa said, someone who is trying to make her suffer slowly. Marco said nothing, which was its own answer. Or, Rosa said carefully, someone who isn't trying to kill her at all. Someone who is using her to send a message to someone else. The silence in the room got a different quality. Marco pushed off the desk and walked to the window. His back was to her. Say the rest of it. A sick child, Rosa said, keeps her father close to home. Or it can, if the father feels guilty enough. If the father believes his absence is somehow connected to her deteriorating health. She paused. Has anyone ever suggested to you that Sophia's condition gets worse when you travel? He turned around slowly. My mother. Yes. Multiple times. Yes. She said the stress of my absence. He stopped. The muscle in his jaw moved. She said stress was a trigger. And that kept you home. For a while, Sush. Something crossed his face, not anger, yet something colder and more deliberate than anger, the emotion that comes before anger in men who have learned to weaponize control. Until the business required me to go regardless. And then Sophia got sicker, Rosa said, just enough sicker to remind you what leaving costs. Marco looked at her for a long, measured moment. How long have you known? I suspected for 4 months. I truly knew last night. She met his eyes. I didn't know who to tell. Your household mister. Corone with respect is not a place where a housekeeper raises concerns about the family without consequences. The last housekeeper, he said. Rosa went very still. What happened to her? She quit, Marco said, abruptly, 6 months before you were hired, no notice, no forwarding address. Left her final paycheck uncollected. He watched Rosa's face. Does that answer your question? It answered it completely. Rosa kept her expression even. Did she also see something she shouldn't have? I don't know, Marco said. I didn't ask the right questions at the time. He said it without self-pity, just the flat acknowledgement of a man cataloging his own failures. I am asking them now. He moved back to his desk and sat down. He opened a drawer and put a small evidence bag on the desk between them. Inside the bag was a glass jar, small, dark, exactly as Rosa remembered it. She looked at it and felt her blood temperature drop a degree. My men found it this morning, he said, tucked behind the dry stores in the pantry, behind the flour at the back, somewhere a kitchen inventory check wouldn't routinely reach. He looked at her. You said 3 weeks ago, kitchen counter, early morning. Yes, and you didn't take it. I didn't know then what I was looking at, Rosa said. I filed it away. I kept watching. She looked at the jar. Is that thallium? The lab will confirm this afternoon, he said, but given the test results, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Rosa looked at the jar and thought about a woman standing in a kitchen at 5:30 in the morning with her hand curled over something she didn't want seen and the particular practiced calm of someone who was not startled by guilt but only by witnesses. Where is she? Rosa asked. Donna Elena. In her rooms, Marco said. She doesn't know about the tox panel yet. A pause. She doesn't know I'm speaking to you. She'll find out. Yes, Marco said. She will. He picked up the evidence bag and looked at Ed. She's my mother, Ms. Delgado. Rosa said nothing. Some things didn't require a response. Some things you just let sit in the room and take up the space they deserve. I need you to tell me something, Marco said, and I need you to tell me the truth regardless of what you think I want to hear. He set the bag down. Is it possible you're wrong? Is there any version of what you've described where this is something other than what it looks like? Rosa thought about it honestly. She gave it real consideration because he deserved that and because she was not a person who let emotion overwrite evidence. No, she said, the pattern is too consistent. The timing is too precise. And the location of that jar is not an accident. She held his gaze. I'm not wrong. Marco nodded, a single, slow, deeply weighted nod, the nod of a man accepting a truth that is going to cost him everything. He turned to his computer. He typed something. He turned the monitor to face her. On the screen was a document, a financial transfer record. Rosa leaned forward to read it. 2 months ago, Marco said $500,000 moved from an account registered to my mother into an account I didn't recognize. My financial team flagged it last week as part of an unrelated audit. He looked at her. I didn't act on it because I couldn't imagine what it meant. He paused. I can imagine now. Rosa studied the record. Who does the receiving account belong to? Marco's expression was controlled, too controlled, the kind of controlled that is one fractured moment away from not being controlled at all. A man named Reyes, Dominic Reyes. He's a chemist. He has a prior conviction for the unlicensed sale of restricted substances and a relationship with a competing family that predates my control of this territory by 15 years. Rosa sat with that. $500,000. A chemist with a record. A pattern 11 months long. She paid someone to provide the substance, Rosa said, and instructions presumably. Small doses, consistent symptoms, not fatal. Rosa thought about it. The goal was never Sophia's death. No, Marco said, and something in his voice finally cracked just at the edge, just the finest fracture in an otherwise perfectly maintained surface. The goal was me. Rosa understood it completely, and suddenly the way you understand an optical illusion, the moment someone shows you what to look for, and then you can never unsee it. Donna Elena, watching her son build an empire, watching him travel, expand, accumulate power and territory in a world that no longer centered itself on her. Watching her influence over him diminish year by year as the business grew. And Sophia, the one thing that could reliably bring Marco Caron to his knees. The one lever left. Make the child sick. Keep the father home. Keep the father guilty and anxious, independent on the only person who seemed to manage Sophia's care without panic. Keep him here. Keep him controllable for 11 months. Rosa felt the fury move through her, again clean and cold and purposeful. What are you going to do? She asked. Marco looked at her steadily. That depends on what Sophia's doctors recommend for her treatment and recovery. That is my first priority. He stood. After that, he didn't complete the sentence. He didn't need to. Mr. Caron, Rosa said, and he looked at her and she said carefully, there's one more thing. He waited. Last night, she said, I received a text message from an unknown number. It told me to be careful about what I said at today's meeting. She reached into her coat and took out her phone, turned it to face him. It also told me to ask what happened to the last housekeeper. Marco looked at the message for a long time. Rosa watched his face and saw the thing moving behind his eyes. Calculation, recognition. A specific kind of wariness that told her this information was not completely new to him, just newly confirmed. Did you respond? He asked. I asked what happened to the previous housekeeper. The contact went cold. He handed the phone back to her. He picked up his own phone and dialed on phone. When the call connected, he said simply, the number that texted Ms. Delgado last night, find it. Find whoever is attached to it. An hour. He hung up. Rosa said, someone in this house is watching what happens here closely enough to know that I was coming today. Yes, Marco said. That's a second problem. Yes, he said again. It is. He looked at her with the particular directness of a man deciding a thing. I need you to continue your normal duties today. Move through the house exactly as you always do. Don't speak to my mother. Don't go near the kitchen pantry. Don't speak to anyone about the tox results or this conversation. And if someone approaches me, tell me immediately, he said. Not Nico, not security, me. He picked up a card from his desk and held it out. That is my direct number, not the main line, not the assistant line, my phone. He waited until she took it. Can you do that? Rosa turned the card over in her fingers. Yes. Rosa. He said her name for the first time and she registered the shift the way it changed the register of the conversation entirely. You should understand something. What you've started here by coming forward there is no quiet way for this to end. Not with what we know, not with who is involved. I know, she said. You may not be safe, your position here, I understand the risk, she said. I understood it when I got in the car this morning. She met his eyes. A child was being poisoned. What was I supposed to do? He studied her face. Whatever he saw there, it seemed to satisfy something in him. Go, he said. Normal routine, and Rosa. She stopped at the door. Thank you. He said it differently than he had at the hospital. At the hospital, it had meant you can go. This time it meant something else entirely. She nodded once and went out into the hallway. The house looked exactly the same as it always did. The lilies on the console table, the portrait, the slight smell of beeswax and coffee that lived in the morning air of the ground floor. Rosa walked to the laundry room, changed into her work uniform, tied her apron, and picked up her supply cart. She was 6 minutes into her normal route, third-floor hallway guest linens, when she heard a door open behind her. Rosa, she turned around. Donna Elena Caron stood into the doorway of her rooms, dressed and composed and pearl-perfect exactly as she always was. Her expression was pleasant. Her eyes were doing something entirely different from pleasant. I didn't see you arrive this morning, Donna Elena said. I came in the staff entrance, Rosa said. Good morning, ma'am. Did you sleep well? Well enough, ma'am. Thank you. Donna Elena stepped into the hallway, not toward Rosa, just out, a casual movement, the kind of movement that positions you between someone and the exit without appearing to do so. You were very upset last night, the old woman said. At the party, understandably, it was alarming, but you said some things that I think on reflection, you probably wish you hadn't. Rosa held her supply cart steady. I was frightened for Sophia, ma'am. Of course you were. Donna Elena smiled. It was a smile that had never learned what warmth felt like. You have a good heart, that's clear, but in a household like this one, a good heart needs to be guided by good judgment. Do you understand what I mean? Rosa looked at the old woman's face at the particular stillness of a predator that has decided it has the advantage and said, I think I understand you perfectly, ma'am. Good. Donna Elena's smile didn't move. Because I've spoken to some people this morning about your employment history, your references. A pause precisely timed. There are some inconsistencies. Nothing serious, perhaps, but the kind of thing that in a house like this requires careful review. And there it was. Rosa felt it land. The shape of it, the threat dressed as concern, the blade inside the courtesy, the smile that was a warning. She had 11 months of evidence in her inside coat pocket. She had Marco Caroni's direct number on a card in her apron. She had a tox panel result that was going to come back confirmed this afternoon. She looked at Donna Elena and said very calmly, I appreciate you letting me know, ma'am. Should I speak with Mr. Caron about it directly? Something flickered in Donna Elena's eyes. The first genuine thing Rosa had seen in them in 11 months. Not anger, not fear, something more precise than both. The look of someone recalculating. That won't be necessary, the old woman said. I don't mind, Rosa said. I saw him this morning, actually. I'd be happy to mention it. The silence between them was a very specific kind of silence. It had weight and history and the particular tension of two people who now understand exactly what the other knows. Donna Elena smoothed the front of her jacket. Enjoy your morning, Rosa, she said, and walked back into her rooms, and the door closed. Rosa turned back to her cart and started walking. Her hands were shaking. She kept walking. She turned the corner into the linen closet, stopped, pressed her back against the shelving, and took 3 very careful breaths. She pulled out Marco's card. She considered it. She put it back. Not yet. He needed her in the house. He needed normal. She could hold herself together for normal. She was back in the hallway cart moving, linen's restacked expression arranged into the careful blankness of someone with nowhere to be. But here when her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She didn't take it out. Not in the hallway. She finished the east wing, pushed her car to the service elevator, and only when the elevator doors closed did she look at the screen. The same unknown number from the night before. One message. She knows you talked to him. You have less time than you think. The jar in the pantry isn't the only one. Rosa read it twice. 3 times. The jar in the pantry isn't the only one. She thought about Sophia in the hospital bed. Stable, they'd said. Stable, but still there. Still on an IV. Still being monitored. Still eating hospital food. And then a thought arrived that turned her cold from the inside out. She pressed the button for the ground floor. Marco had said, the goal was never Sophia's death. But what happened when the plan was exposed? What happened when the leverage failed? What happened when a woman with patience and pearls and 50 years of knowing how to serve in dangerous houses realized that the walls were closing in? The plan changed. Rosa stepped out of the elevator and walked quickly now. Not running, not yet, but close toward the study, because if there was another jar, it wasn't in this house. It was somewhere it could still reach Sophia. And Sophia was in a hospital room. And hospital rooms had staff, and staff could be paid, and $500,000 was not the limit of what Donna Elena Caroni was willing to spend to ensure that the one lever she had left still worked. Rosa knocked on the study door. Come in. She opened it. Marco was on his phone. He looked at her face and ended the call mid-sentence. What happened? He said. Rosa crossed the room, put her phone on his desk with the message open and said, Sophia needs to be moved. Right now, a different room, different floor, different name if possible. And her food, everything she eats from this moment needs to come from outside. Sealed, verified. She looked at him. Tell me I'm wrong. Marco looked at the message. He picked up his phone and dialed before the silence had a chance to settle. Get me the hospital, he said. Director level now. Rosa stood across the desk and felt the story she had been holding alone for 11 months finally become something shared, something that had hands and resources and a man behind it who would burn down everything necessary to protect his daughter. It was not a comfortable feeling, but it was the right one. The hospital director's name was Gerald Fitch, and he was a man who had spent 22 years learning how to say no to powerful people without appearing to say no. He was very good at it. He had a whole system, the sympathetic lean, the slow nod, the carefully worded redirection that left the other person feeling heard while changing absolutely nothing. He lasted about 40 seconds with Marco Caron before abandoning the system entirely. Rosa stood by the window of the study and listened to Marco's side of the call and watched a man dismantle bureaucratic resistance the way a surgeon removes something that doesn't belong precisely without hesitation and with the full understanding that speed matters more than comfort. I'm not asking you to violate protocol, Marco said, and his voice had dropped to the register that Rosa had come to understand meant the opposite of calm. I'm asking you to move my daughter to a secure room under an assumed admission name and to ensure that nothing she consumes comes from your facility's kitchen. I will have food delivered and sealed, and I will have a person of my choosing present in her room at all times. You will make this happen in the next 30 minutes, or I will have my attorney explain to your board why your hospital failed to act on a toxicology result that indicated deliberate poisoning of a minor patient in your care. A pause. Yes, I thought so. Thank you, Gerald. He ended the call. He looked at Rosa. She'll be moved within the hour. And someone she trusts in the room, Rosa said. She'll be scared if she wakes up in a different place and doesn't recognize anyone. Marco picked up his phone again, and then he stopped. He looked at his desk. Then he looked at her. You, he said. She trusts you. She does. I need you here. I know, Rosa said, but Sophia is 7 years old and she's been sick 12 times in 11 months, and she's in a hospital room in a strange bed, and she doesn't fully understand what's happening to her. She let that sit for a moment. What do you need more, a housekeeper in this building or someone Sophia trusts in that room? Marco was quiet for a moment. That was not indecision, but something more like the experience of being outmaneuvered by someone you hadn't expected to outmaneuver you. Nico will take you, he said. I need you back here by 2. Rosa was already untying her apron. She was halfway down the hall when she heard the door to Donna Elena's rooms open behind her. She didn't turn around. She kept walking smooth and steady, the way you walk when you know someone is watching and you want them to see that you are not afraid. She heard the old woman's footsteps stop. She turned the corner and kept going. In the car, Nico drove and said nothing for the first 4 minutes. Then he said, "How bad is it?" "Bad," Rosa said. "Is she going to be arrested?" Rosa looked at the city moving past the window. "That depends on Mr. Caron." Nico absorbed that. "He won't," he said. "You know that. She's his mother." "I know," Rosa said, "but there are other ways to stop someone." Nico didn't respond. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and Rosa thought about what she knew and what she still didn't. And the thing she kept returning to was the text message. The jar in the pantry isn't the only one. Someone in that house had sent that. Someone who knew enough to warn her, who had access to information about her schedule and her meeting with Marco, and who had been watching this situation closely enough and long enough to know that one jar was not the whole story. Who in that house had both the knowledge and the motivation to help her? She was still turning it over when they pulled into the hospital parking structure, and Nico handed her a visitor badge with a name she didn't recognize on it. "New protocol," he said. "Her room is on the 4th floor now. Ask for the nurse at the East Station. Give her the name on that badge. Nobody else." Rosa nodded and got out. The East Station nurse was a compact woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of face that had made 1,000 decisions and lived with all of them. She looked at Rosa's badge, looked at Rosa's face, and said quietly, "She woke up 20 minutes ago. She's been asking for you." Rosa felt the tightness in her chest loosen by exactly 1 degree. How is she physically responding? Well, they flushed most of it. The nurse paused. Emotionally is a different question. She lowered her voice further. "She asked me this morning if someone was trying to hurt her." Rosa stopped. What did you tell her? I told her she was safe. The nurse looked at her steadily. Was that a lie? She is safe, Rosa said. Right now in this room, she is safe. The nurse considered that answer with the particular precision of someone who understood what it did and didn't include. And then she said, room 414. She's been awake long enough to be frightened. Don't let her be frightened long. Rosa walked down the corridor and pushed open the door to 414. Sophia was sitting up in the hospital bed with her knees pulled to her chest and her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was wearing a hospital gown that was too big, and she had a piece of the blanket twisted in both hands. And her eyes, when they found Rosa's face, did something that Rosa would carry with her for the rest of her life. They filled up completely all the way to the brim, and then she pressed her lips together and breathed hard through her nose, the way children do when they're trying not to cry in front of someone because they're not sure it's allowed. Hey, Rosa said. Hey, Sophia whispered. Rosa sat in the chair beside the bed and reached out and took the small, twisted hands in both of hers. She didn't say anything right away. She just held on the way she had on the ambulance floor and let the child feel the weight of another person in the room. After a while, Sophia said, My room is different. They moved you to a better one. Why? Rosa thought carefully. Because your dad wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. Sophia was quiet. Then, is my dad coming? Later today. He has some things to handle first, but he's coming. Is it because of me? Sophia asked. The things he has to handle. Rosa looked at the child's face, the directness of it, the watchful intelligence behind the question, the way 7-year-old children in difficult households develop a particular talent for understanding more than the adults around them intend to show. Yes, she said, but that's not a bad thing. That's your dad doing what he should be doing. Sophia absorbed this. She looked down at their joined hands. Rosa, she said, I heard something last night when they thought I was sleeping. She kept her eyes down. One of the nurses was talking outside my door. She said the word poison. Rosa's grip on the child's hands didn't change. She kept her breathing even. What did you think when you heard that? Sophia looked up. Her eyes were dry now, very serious. I thought that's why I keep getting sick. Because it's not in me, it's in the food. She paused. I've been thinking that for a long time, but I didn't know who to tell. The word who landed differently than the word what would have. Not what was wrong, who to tell, which meant Sophia had already moved past wondering whether someone was hurting her and into the more sophisticated and more painful question of which adults in her life she could trust. At 7 years old. Rosa said very carefully, Did you have an idea about where it might be coming from? Sophia was quiet for a long time, long enough that Rosa thought she might have pushed too far. Then the child said, still looking at their hand, Grandma Elena always checks my plate before I eat. She says it's to make sure the kitchen didn't make a mistake. A pause. But Papa doesn't have anyone check his plate. Rosa kept her face perfectly still. And she only checks it when Papa isn't home, Sophia said. When he's home, she just says grace and we eat. She looked up at Rosa, and in her eyes was something no 7-year-old should have, the profound loneliness of someone who has figured out an unbearable thing and had to carry it alone. I didn't want to be wrong, she said. I didn't want to say it and be wrong. Rosa said, you weren't wrong. The words came out of her before she could choose them or shape them or decide if they were wise. They came out because they were true and because this child had earned the truth, had earned it by surviving 11 months of slow poisoning without a single adult in her household asking the right questions. Sophia stared at her. It was her. Your dad is handling it, Rosa said. Right now, today. You are safe in this room and your dad is handling it, and none of this is going to continue. She squeezed the small hands. Do you hear me? It stops today. Something happened in Sophia's face, then a release like air leaving a space that had been sealed too long, and the child leaned forward and put her forehead against Rosa's shoulder and made a sound that was not quite crying and not quite a word and was somehow both. Rosa held on. She was still holding on when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Marco, one line, we have a problem. Come back as soon as she's settled. Don't tell her. Rosa read it once. Tucked the phone away. She stayed another 20 minutes until Sophia had eaten the sealed meal Nico had sent up and kept it down, and her eyes had gone soft with the beginning of real sleep. Rosa waited until the breathing steadied, then stood slowly so as not to disturb the blanket. At the door, the nurse from the East Station was waiting. She held out a folded piece of paper. "This was left at the main reception desk this morning," she said. "Addressed to the patient by her real name." She paused. "For the room change." Rosa took the paper. She unfolded it in the hallway. It was a single line printed, no signature. "Tell your father that what the maid knows is not the worst of it." Rosa read it 3 times, folded it back up, put it in her coat pocket alongside her notebook. She walked very quickly back to Nico's car. By the time they reached the estate, it was 11:47 in the morning, and the house had changed again, the same way it had changed that morning, same furniture, different air. But now the difference had a specific character. There were 4 men Rosa didn't recognize in the hallway outside Marco's study, and a 5th one standing at the foot of the main staircase, and all of them had the deliberate stillness of people waiting for instructions. Nico touched her elbow before she reached the study door. "Brace yourself," he said quietly. She looked at him. "The lab confirmed the second jar 20 minutes ago," he said, "and the man Reyes, the chemist, they found him this morning." He stopped. "Found him how?" Rosa said. "The kind of found that means he can't answer questions anymore," Nico said. Rosa absorbed that. Someone had gotten to Reyes, which meant someone knew Marco was looking, which meant information was moving out of this house in real time, which meant the person texting her warnings was not the only secondary player in this story. She pushed the study door open without knocking. Marco was standing with his back to her, again phone in hand, and across the desk from him was a man she had never seen, late 50s, gray suit, carrying the particular brand of controlled authority that she associated with a law enforcement, or something adjacent to it. Both men turned when she entered. Marco said, "Rosa, this is Vincent Caruso. He's been working a separate matter that intersects with ours." Vincent Caruso looked at Rosa with the measuring attention of someone reviewing a file he'd read before meeting the subject. "Ms. Delgado," he said, "you've been in this house for 11 months. "Yes." "You kept records, unofficial in your head, of Sophia's incidents in Marco's location." "Yes." "Did you ever see anyone other than Donna Elena near the child's food?" Rosa thought carefully. "Chef Arnaud oversees all kitchen prep. The kitchen staff rotate. But Donna Elena is the only person I observed with unsupervised access to food after it left the kitchen and before it reached Sophia's plate." She paused. "She called it quality control." Caruso looked at Marco. Something passed between them. "Tell her," Marco said. Caruso turned back to Rosa. "Donna Elena has been providing information to a competing organization for approximately 2 years. Financial records, movement, schedules, operational details." He said it with the flat economy of someone reading a report. "The arrangement predates the poisoning. Our working theory is that the poisoning was not solely about controlling Marco's movements." He paused. "It was also a demonstration of capability, proof of access. She was showing them what she could do." Rosa stared at him. She was poisoning her own granddaughter to prove to someone else that she could. To prove she had deep enough access to do it without detection, Caruso said, and to keep Marco distracted enough that he wouldn't notice the information bleed. The room was very quiet. Rosa thought about 11 months of watching a child get sick. About the particular composure of a woman who sat at a birthday table and said, "This always passes," and meant it in a way that was not comfort, but confirmation. About the coldness required to look at a 7-year-old and see leverage. She put her hand in her coat pocket and took out the folded piece of paper from the hospital. "This was left at the hospital reception desk this morning," she said, "before the room change." She put it on the desk. "Addressed to Sophia by name." Marco unfolded it, read it, handed it to Caruso. Caruso read it. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. He looked at Marco. "She knows we're moving." "She knew before we started," Marco said. "Then she's already transferred whatever else she had to transfer." Caruso folded the paper. "The question is what she's trying to accomplish with this." He held up the note. "What the maid knows is not the worst of it." He looked at Rosa. "Do you know what that means?" "No," Rosa said honestly, "but I know who might be able to tell us." Both men looked at her. "The person who's been texting me warnings," she said. "They've been inside this situation long enough to know things I don't. They knew about the second jar before Marco's team found it. They knew about the previous housekeeper. She looked at Marco. Have your people identified the number yet? Traced to a burner, Marco said. Purchased 14 months ago. Well, he paused. But the purchase location was 4 blocks from this estate. Someone local, someone connected, someone who had been watching for 14 months, 3 months before Rosa had even been hired. The previous housekeeper, Rosa said suddenly, you said she left without collecting her last paycheck. Do you have her contact information? Her full name? Marco looked at Nico, who had been standing silently by the door. Nico said Carmen Vidal. She worked here 8 months, left 16 months ago. He paused. We have an address on file, but it was never updated. Try it anyway, Rosa said. Why, Marco asked. Because she left abruptly after seeing something she shouldn't have, Rosa said. And someone bought a burner phone 3 months after she left and 4 blocks from this house and has been sending me warnings that only someone with direct prior knowledge of this situation could send. She looked at him. What if she didn't disappear because she was afraid? What if she disappeared because she was building something, gathering evidence before bringing it forward? The silence in the study had a different texture now, the texture of a room in which people are recalculating. Then Marco's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something happened in his face that Rosa had seen only once before at the hospital when he'd first seen Sophia in that bed. The wall briefly becoming transparent. He answered. Mother, he said. Rosa stood absolutely still. Marco's voice was controlled, precise, and utterly without warmth. No, you will not go to the hospital. You will stay in your rooms. A pause. Because I know, all of it, the lab results, the transfers, Reyes. His jaw moved. No, don't. Another pause longer. Then that's your choice. He ended the call. He set the phone on the desk. Nobody spoke. She's asking to see Sophia, he said finally. Caruso said, absolutely not. I know, Marco said. He picked up the phone again and called security and said 4 words very quietly, lock the east wing. Then he put it down and didn't move for a moment, and Rosa watched him absorb the specific devastation of a man who has confirmed something he could not afford to believe until he had no choice. Marco, Caruso said carefully, we need to talk about next steps. I know what the next steps are, Marco said. He looked at Rosa. I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Yes, Rosa said. The note says what you know isn't the worst of it. His eyes were steady on hers. Is there something you haven't told me? Rosa held his gaze. She thought about everything she had written in her notebook. Every date, every detail, every moment. No, she said. Everything I know is already in front of you. Then whoever sent that note, Marco said, knows something you don't. Yes, Rosa said, and we need to find them before my mother does. The words settled into the room with the weight of everything they implied: the race, the stakes, the specific danger of a very intelligent and now fully exposed woman who had nothing left to lose. Caruso's phone buzzed. He read the screen. His expression shifted just slightly, just enough. The address for Carmen Vidal, he said. He looked up. There's activity. What kind of activity? Marco asked. Caruso turned the phone screen to face him. Rosa couldn't see the full message, but she saw Marco's face, and she saw the moment his expression crystallized into something cold and final. Someone got there first, Marco said. He was already moving toward the door. Rosa caught Caruso's eye and saw what was in it. Not panic, but urgency. The specific urgency of a situation that has just shifted from managed to critical. Is she alive? Rosa asked. Caruso answered without looking away from his phone. As of 8 minutes ago, yes. Then there's still time, Rosa said, and she followed Marco out the door. Carmen Vidal had been living apparently for 16 months in a third-floor walk-up in a part of the city that didn't appear on the kind of maps that real estate developers used. The building had a buzzer system with half the names scratched off and a stairwell that smelled like old cooking and older decisions. Marco's car stopped outside it, and he was out the door before Nico had the engine fully off, and Rosa was right behind him because no one had told her to stay in the car, and she had learned a long time ago that permission withheld is not the same as permission denied. 2 of Marco's men were already in the building. Caruso had called ahead. By the time Rosa reached the third-floor landing, she could hear a voice from behind an open door, female, low and controlled, in the specific way that people control their voices when they are managing pain. She pushed through the doorway behind Marco and stopped. Carmen Vidal was sitting on a kitchen chair in the middle of her small living room, and she was holding a dish towel against her left forearm, and the dish towel was red. A man Rosa recognized as one of Marco's security team was crouched in front of her, applying pressure. Carmen herself was perhaps 40, dark-haired, strong-featured, with a kind of face that had once been pretty and was now something more durable than pretty. She looked up when Marco walked in, and the expression that crossed her face was not fear. It was relief complicated by something that looked almost like guilt. "You got here fast," she said. "Tell me what happened," Marco said. "Man came to my door 40 minutes ago. Said he had a message from Donna Elena." Carmen's jaw tightened. "I knew what that meant. I tried to close the door. He was faster." She glanced at her arm. "Knife, not deep. He wasn't trying to kill me. He was delivering a warning." "What was the message?" Marco asked. Carmen looked at him steadily. "She knows I've been contacting your housekeeper. She knows I've been feeding information." A pause. "She said to tell you that if you move forward with what you're planning, she'll release what she has." "What does she have?" Caruso said from the doorway. Carmen looked at Caruso, and her expression shifted, the recognition of someone identifying an unknown quantity and deciding quickly what category it belongs in. "Who are you, Passin?" "Someone on your side," Caruso said. "Answer the question." Carmen looked at Marco. "She has documentation, financial records, operational logs, communications going back 8 years. She's been keeping a file on you since before your father died." She let that land. "Not just your business, your arrangements. The things that can't be explained to a federal prosecutor with a subpoena." The room was quiet. Rosa watched Marco's face do the thing she had seen it do twice before, absorb a truth that reorganized everything around it without changing a single visible feature. He was very good at it. She suspected he had been practicing since childhood. "She built an insurance policy," Marco said. "She built a Carmen said, "and she's been sitting on the trigger for years. The poisoning." Carmen stopped, pressed the dish towel harder against her arm, breathed. "The poisoning was never only about controlling you. It was about demonstrating to the people she was working with that she had access and leverage and the will to use both. Every time Sophia got sick, she sent documentation to her contacts proving it was her. Proof of capability. Proof that she could reach inside your household without your knowledge. She was selling my daughter's suffering as a credential," Marco said. Carmen didn't soften it. "Yes." Marco turned and walked 2 steps to the window and stood there. Rosa could see his hands in the stillness in them, the absolute total stillness of a man exerting the kind of control that costs everything to maintain. "How do you know all this?" Rosa asked Carmen. Carmen looked at her. "You're Rosa." "Yes. I've been watching this house for 14 months, Carmen said. "After I left, I couldn't—" She stopped, started again. "I saw something before I left that I didn't understand at the time. Donna Elena early morning in the garden meeting a man I didn't recognize. They exchanged an envelope. I thought it was personal business. I told myself it was none of my concern." She looked down at her arm. "Then Sophia started getting sick, and I followed the news. And I started to understand what I'd seen." She looked back at Rosa. "I couldn't go to the police. Not in this family's business. I couldn't go to Marco directly. I didn't know who in his circle was clean. So I waited. I watched. I got a burner phone. And when you came on the scene and I saw you paying attention, I decided you were the safest path." "You've been watching me," Rosa said. "I was watching the house. You were the most observant person in it." Carmen's mouth curved briefly. "You count stairs. You notice which doors close differently. You were the right person." Rosa thought about 11 months of noting things she wasn't sure anyone else would believe. "Why didn't you tell me more directly, sooner?" "Because I needed to know how far you'd go," Carmen said simply, "and I needed to know if Marco would listen. Men like him, they listen when they have no other choice. You had to get him to that point before the information I have would mean anything to him." She glanced at Marco's back. "Has she reached that point?" "We're here, aren't we?" Marco said without turning around. Carmen nodded once. She reached under the kitchen chair with her uninjured arm and came up with a flat metal box, the kind used for fireproof document storage. She set it on the table. 14 months of work, she said. Records of every contact Donna Elena made with the competing organization. Dates, methods, content where I could access it. Bank records. And she opened the box and removed a sealed envelope and set it separately. A copy of the documentation she's been holding over you. She gave a set to her contacts as collateral. I obtained a copy. She looked at Marco. Whatever she tells you she has, this is it. And now you have it too. Marco turned from the window. He looked at the envelope. He didn't move on toward it immediately. Rosa noticed that the deliberate pause, the choice not to lunge at it, even though every instinct in the room suggested he wanted to. How did you obtain this? He asked. Carefully, Carmen said, and at some personal cost. She looked at her arm. Today's not the first warning I've received. Caruso moved to the table and had looked at the box without touching it. This is enough, he said quietly to Marco. Combined with the tox panel and the financial transfers, this is enough. Enough for what? Rosa asked. Caruso looked at her. Enough to ensure that whatever documentation Donna Elena releases about Marco's operations is understood by every relevant party to be the product of a woman who spent 2 years actively working against her own family in exchange for financial compensation from a competing criminal organization. He paused. Enough to make her a liability to the people she was working with rather than an asset. Enough to remove her leverage entirely. Rosa processed that. It wasn't justice in the form she might have chosen. It wasn't a courtroom or a sentence or a clear public accounting. It was the particular kind of resolution available in the world these people inhabited. Leverage neutralized by counter-leverage threat, dismantled by exposure. A dangerous woman rendered harmless not by law, but by the destruction of her usefulness to anyone. And Sophia, Rosa said, Sophia gets treatment and recovery, and a household that is no longer poisoning her, Caruso said. He looked at Marco, and a father who has no more operational distractions compelling him to be elsewhere. Marco held Caruso's gaze for a moment. Something passed between them, something with history behind it. The currency of two people who had known each other long enough to speak in shorthand. Give us the room, Marco said. Caruso took Carmen's arm gently and helped her up. Rosa moved toward this door with them, and Marco said, Not you. She stopped. The door closed. The room was quiet. Marco sat down on Carmen's sofa, the first time Rosa had ever seen him sit anywhere that wasn't a position of authority, in a chair that belonged to a position of authority. He sat like a person for a moment. Just a person in a difficult situation, without the architecture of power to organize himself around. He said, I need to tell you something. Rosa sat down across from him. All right. When I came to this house after my father died, he said, I believe my mother had been a victim of his ambitions, his coldness. I believed the stories she told me about what her life had been. He looked at his hands. I protected her accordingly. I gave her a home, resources, a position in the household. I kept her close because I believed she was safer close. He paused. I also believed on some level that keeping her close was protecting Sophia. That her involvement in Sophia's care was good, loving. Rosa said nothing. She had my father's files, Marco said. I found out 3 years ago, operational records from before I took over. I asked her about them. She said she destroyed them out of loyalty. He looked up. She hadn't. She was already planning, Rosa said. She was already positioned, Marco said. I just didn't see the shape of it. He was quiet for a moment. I am very good at seeing the shape of things. It's essentially the only skill I have that matters. And she was standing directly inside my blind spot for 8 years. Rosa looked at this man who could fill a room with the weight of his presence, who had dismantled a hospital director's resistance in 40 seconds, who ran 3 cities and controlled more moving parts than Rosa could count, and she saw something that she recognized from her own life. The particular grief of someone who had trusted a parent and discovered the trust had been not just misplaced, but weaponized. What are you going to do? She asked. What I have to do, he said. What I should have done when Sophia first got sick, instead of accepting explanations that let me continue believing something that wasn't true. He picked up the sealed envelope and turned it in his hands. I have a daughter who is 7 years old and has spent the last 11 months being systematically poisoned by her grandmother in a house full of people who were paid to protect her. He set the envelope down. I have to fix that. Everything else, the rest of it, the files, my mother, the exposure, that is all secondary to fixing that. She's going to be okay, Rosa said. Sophia, the doctor said. She responded well. The doctor said her system needs time and monitoring. Marco looked at her directly. I'd like you to be part of that monitoring, full-time, not as a housekeeper. As he paused, searching for the word. As someone Sophia trusts in her daily life, paid accordingly, with the authority to raise concerns directly to me without going through the household structure. He held her gaze. I'm asking because she asked for you, and because you were the only person in my household for 11 months who was paying attention. Rosa held the weight of the offer. She thought about her small apartment and the bus that only worked half the time, and the $11 an hour she had been accepting for the privilege of watching a child be hurt in a house full of people who should have known better. She said, I have some conditions. Something that was not quite a smile crossed Marco's face. I assumed you would. Sophia's medical care is handled by outside doctors with no connection to this household or anyone in it. All of it documented, transparent, second opinions on everything. She held up a finger. Her food, all of it, is either prepared by me personally or by kitchen staff that I have reviewed and approved. Not Arno, not anyone who was in that kitchen during the 11 months. Another finger. And she sees a therapist, a child psychologist with no connection to your world. Someone who can help her process what happened in language that a 7-year-old can use. She looked at him. She knows more than you think she does. She figured out the pattern before most of the adults around her did. She's going to need help with what that means. Marco was quiet for a moment. Is that everything? One more thing, Rosa said. If I see something in that house that concerns me, I tell you directly and immediately, and you listen. Not thank me and redirect. You listen. She paused. I did this once and it almost wasn't enough, because I waited too long out of fear of not being believed. I won't wait again. Agreed, Marco said, simply without qualification. Rosa looked at him. All of it, he said, without negotiation. She nodded. She stood. She was at the door when Marco said, why did you care so much about Sophia? You had every reason to keep your head down. The previous housekeeper did. Most people do. Rosa stopped. She thought about the question, really thought about it the way it deserved. I have a daughter, she said. She's 23 now. She lives in another city. When she was 7, I was working 2 jobs, and I wasn't home enough, and someone at her school was bullying her, and she didn't tell me for 4 months because she didn't want to worry me. She kept her hand on the doorframe. She was carrying something alone that she should never have been carrying alone, and I was too busy surviving to notice. She looked back at him. I noticed Sophia, that's all. I noticed her and I couldn't look away. Marco said nothing, but he looked at her the way people look at things that have just become clear after a long time being obscured. Rosa went back into the hallway. Caruso was waiting. Carmen had been moved to a back room. Through the door, Rosa could hear the low voice of someone on a phone, Nico, coordinating something. Caruso fell into step beside her. He's going to handle the mother quietly, he said, low matter of the fact. I know, Rosa said. Does that bother you? Rosa thought about Sophia's face, about the note at the hospital, about a woman who had looked at a 7-year-old and seen a tool. It bothers me that it's necessary, she said. It doesn't bother me that it's happening. Caruso nodded slowly. For what it's worth, what you did here coming forward, the documentation bringing this to the point where it could be acted on, that took something that most people don't have. Most people haven't spent 43 years being invisible in other people's houses, Rosa said. You see a lot from invisible. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it, expecting Marco or Nico. It was the hospital. Not a call. A text from the nurse at the East Station, the woman with silver-streaked hair and the face that had made 1,000 decisions. It said, room 414, now. She's asking for her father and she won't calm down. She heard something on the staff floor. Rosa looked at the message. She looked at her watch. She walked to the door of the back room and pushed it open without knocking. Marco was on his phone, but he saw her face and ended the call. Sophia, Rosa said. She's upset. She heard something. We need to go. Marco was on his feet before she finished the sentence. In the car moving through noon traffic faster than the traffic should have permitted, Rosa's phone buzzed again. Same unknown number, Carmen's burner. She opened it, expecting a follow-up. It was 4 words. She didn't act alone. Rosa read it again. Felt the specific cold of a sentence that reorders everything you thought was settled. She looked at Marco beside her. He was looking at his own phone. She made a decision in the space of one breath. She turned her screen and held it where he could see. He read it. He took her phone from her hand. Typed back himself. Who else? 3 seconds. 5. 10. The response came slowly, one word at a time, like someone typing with great air or great fear. The man who manages your money. Marco's face went very still. Rosa thought about Caruso back at Carmen's apartment. Caruso, who had arrived at exactly the right moment, who had all the right information, who had guided the day's events, with the particular smooth competence of someone who had known in advance where the terrain was leading. She said quietly, Marco. I know, he said. His voice was controlled, perfectly controlled, the kind of control that is the last wall before something catastrophic. Caruso, she said. Not Caruso, Marco said. He looked up from the phone. His eyes were very dark and very certain. My accountant, Thomas Reed, 20 years. He manages everything. He handed her phone back. He was also the one who told me 3 months ago that the financial flag on my mother's transfers was too small to investigate. He had buried it. A man 20 years trusted had found the first evidence and buried it. He knew, Rosa said. He facilitated, Marco said. The transfers, the contact with Reyes, the payments. My mother could plan, but she needed infrastructure she didn't have direct access to. His jaw tightened. He provided it. The car stopped outside the hospital. Marco didn't move immediately. He sat with his hands flat on his knees and breathed, and Rosa sat beside him and let him breathe. And outside the city, moved past without any awareness of the things happening inside this car. Go to Sophia, he said finally. She needs someone steady right now, and I am not. He stopped. I need 10 minutes. Go to her. 10 minutes, Rosa said. Then you come up. Yes, Rosa got out. She walked into the hospital. She rode the elevator to the 4th floor. She walked down the corridor toward room 414, and she could hear from 6 doors away the sound of a child crying, not softly, not politely, the way Sophia usually kept things contained, but openly, urgently, the way children cry when they have been strong for too long and have finally run out of strong. She pushed the door open. Sophia looked up from the bed. Her face was red and wet and completely unguarded in the way it only was when she was past caring about composure. Rosa, she said, in the way she said it like it was the answer to a question she'd been asking for hours, broke something open in Rosa's chest. Right here, Rosa said. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and pulled the child against her and felt the small body shake with everything it had been holding. Right here, I've got you. I heard a nurse say something about my grandma, Sophia said against her shoulder. She said she... I know, Rosa said. I know what you heard. Is it true? Sophia pulled back and looked at her with those dark, searching eyes that were her father's eyes that saw everything and forgave too easily and had spent 7 years trying to understand a world that didn't explain itself to children. Did she really? Yes, Rosa said, because she had promised herself in this room that she would not let this child carry unbearable things alone. But it is over. Do you hear me? It's over. And your dad is downstairs and he's coming up in 10 minutes and he is never going to let anyone hurt you again. Sophia stared at her. Never. Never, Rosa said. I will personally make sure of it. Something passed through the child's face, not relief entirely, not yet, but the first tentative movement toward it, the way sunlight moves across a floor in the early morning, small and incremental and warm. Promise, Sophia whispered. On everything I have, Rosa said. Outside in the corridor, the elevator opened and Rosa heard footsteps. She recognized Marco's walk, the weight and purpose of it coming down the hall. She held Sophia's hand and waited for the door to open. Marco walked through the door of room 414 and stopped. He stopped because Sophia was looking at him. Really looking at him the way she rarely did anymore, without the careful blankness she had learned to wear in his presence, without the performance of being fine. She was looking at him the way she had when she was 3 years old, and had woken from a nightmare and found him in the doorway of her room, and the look on her face then had been pure, uncomplicated animal relief. You're here, the bad thing ends, and he had not seen that look on his daughter's face in 4 years. He saw it now. He crossed the room in 4 steps and sat on the edge of the bed and put his arms around her, and she grabbed the front of his jacket with both hands and pressed her face into his chest, and he held the back of her head with one hand and said nothing because there was nothing yet that words could do that holding couldn't do better. Rosa stood and moved quietly to the window. She gave them 2 minutes. She counted them, watching the city below, giving the silence the space it needed. Then Sophia said, muffled against Marco's jacket, "Rosa said it's over." "It's over," Marco said. "She said you're not going to let anyone hurt me again." "Never," Marco said. And the word came out of him the way words come out of people when they are not performing them but simply releasing them with the weight of everything they cost to mean. Sophia pulled back and looked at his face. She studied it the way she always studied things seriously, thoroughly, the way a child does when they have learned that faces tell you more than words. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" Marco asked. She thought about it. Like something that was pulling at you stopped. Marco looked at his daughter for a long moment and then said very quietly, "Yeah, something did." Rosa watched this from the window and felt the particular fullness of a moment that she knew she would carry for the rest of her life, not the dramatic moments, not the evidence and the confrontations and the cold terror of the previous 24 hours, but this. A father and a daughter on a hospital bed. 4 words, the specific sound of something broken beginning to be repaired. Her phone buzzed. Caruso. She stepped into the hallway to take it. "Reed is in custody," Caruso said. No greeting, no preamble. "Federal. His office was raided 40 minutes ago. They found the files, both sets. The ones he was holding for Donna Elena and the operational records he'd been skimming for the competing organization on the side." A pause, Renaud. He was running his own angle. He wasn't just facilitating Donna Elena's arrangement. He was using it as cover for his own information sales. 2 clients, double billing both. Rosa leaned against the corridor wall. So Donna Elena thought she had a partner, and she had a parasite. She thought she was the most dangerous person in the room, Caruso said. She wasn't. "Does she know about Reed?" "She does now," Caruso said. "I made sure of it." His voice was dry. "She's been in her rooms for 6 hours. Her phone was removed this morning by Marco's order. She has no outgoing communication, no way to contact her handlers, and as of 30 minutes ago, the organization she was working with received documentation of the full scope of what she was providing, including the fact that she was doing it while Reed was simultaneously selling the same information to their competitors." A pause. "She is no longer an asset to anyone. She is now a liability to everyone." Rosa understood. The bomb had been defused not by disarming it, but by making it useless by removing every party who might benefit from its detonation. Donna Elena's leverage over Marco was only leverage if someone would act on it. Without handlers willing to use it, without Reed to facilitate the transfer, without a competitive organization that trusted her as a source, the files were just paper. "What happens to her?" Rosa asked. "Marco is handling the terms," Caruso said. "He'll tell you when he's ready." He paused. "I wanted you to know Reed is secured. You should tell Carmen. She earned that." He ended the call. Rosa stood in the corridor for a moment, processing the architecture of what had just collapsed, the whole constructed thing, 2 years of arrangement and counter-arrangement, and a grandmother willing to poison her own granddaughter as a demonstration of relevance, and felt not triumph exactly, but something quieter and more durable. The feeling of a floor that had been unsafe becoming solid again under your feet. She went back into the room. Marco was still with Sophia. He looked up when Rosa entered, and she gave him a small nod. "It's done," and she saw him absorb it, the slight settling of something in his shoulders, and he looked back at Sophia and said, "I have to make one more call, and then I'm going to stay here the rest of today. Is that okay?" Sophia looked at him with the devastating directness of a child who has learned not to assume. The whole rest of today," Marco said. "I'll be in that chair when you wake up." Sophia considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "You can use my phone to watch something if you get bored," she offered. "I have a game that's pretty good." Something cracked open in Marco's face that was not quite a smile, but was everything a smile points toward. Yeah, he said. What kind of game? It's about a dog that goes on adventures, Sophia said. You'd probably think it's babyish, but it's actually kind of hard. I like dogs, Marco said. Rosa went back to the window and let them have it. Let the small, ridiculous, perfect conversation about the dog game be what it was. A father and daughter finding their way back to each other through the only door that was open right now, which was a narrow one and humble but completely real. She was still at the window when Marco came to stand beside her 10 minutes later, Sophia dozing behind them with the television on low. Reed is in custody, Rosa said quietly. I know. Caruso called me too. He looked at his daughter. It was Reed who buried the financial flag. Reed who handled the transfer to Reyes. Reed who ensured there was no paper trail leading anywhere except in circles. He paused. 20 years. He sat across from me twice a week for 20 years. How do you come back from that? Rosa asked. Not rhetorically, genuinely, because she wanted to know how he intended to answer it for himself. Marco looked at her. You don't come back from it, he said. You come forward from it. There's a difference. He looked back at Sophia. You change what you can change, and you hold the rest of it, and you make sure the people who are still here are safe. He was quiet for a moment. And you try to be in the room more. Rosa nodded. He said, about my mother. She waited. She'll leave the city, he said, permanently. The terms are being formalized now. She'll have what she needs to live comfortably. That's not something I'm able to take away from myself regardless of what she's done. But she will have no contact with Sophia. No contact with this household. No access to anything in my world. He paused. She will not be charged. Not because I'm protecting her what she did to Sophia. If I thought a courtroom could hold it, I would put her in one without flinching. But the exposure involved in a prosecution would reach Sophia. I won't do that to her. Rosa thought about justice again. The version available here versus the version she might have wished for. She thought about what Carmen had risked, what Sophia had endured, what the previous housekeeper had fled rather than face. She should know, Rosa said carefully, that Sophia knows. That a 7-year-old child figured it out before most of the adults around her and has been carrying it alone for months and is going to carry it for the rest of her life. She looked at Marco. Whatever terms you negotiate, make sure she understands that. Marco was quiet for a moment. She will, he said. I'll make sure of it personally. Rosa accepted that. It was not everything, but it was something. Sometimes something was what you had. Her phone buzzed one more time. She looked at it expecting Caruso. It was a number she didn't recognize, not the burner, a different number. She answered carefully. Rosa Delgado. A woman's voice. Calm, professional. Yes. My name is Dr. Andrea Wells. I'm a child psychologist. I received a referral from a Mr. Caruso regarding a 7-year-old patient. He said to call you first before contacting the family directly. A pause. He said you'd know why. Rosa looked at Marco. Yes, she said into the phone. I know why, sorry. Can you hold for one moment? She lowered it. Caruso arranged a therapist for Sophia, she said to Marco. Dr. Andrea Wells, she's calling for intake. Marco looked at her, the particular look of a man who keeps encountering evidence that the people around him have been 3 steps ahead. Take the call, he said. Schedule it. Rosa stepped back into the corridor and spent 12 minutes with Dr. Wells, 12 minutes that felt more productive than most of the meetings she had overheard through closed doors in the Corona state over 11 months. Dr. Wells was precise and warm and asked exactly the right questions and none of the wrong ones, and by the end of the call, Rosa had given her everything she needed to begin. When she came back in, Marco was sitting in the chair beside the bed. Sophia was still sleeping. He had her phone in his hand and was against every expectation, genuinely attempting to navigate the dog adventure game, his expression one of concentration that was so misplaced on his particular face that Rosa nearly laughed out loud. He looked up. This is actually hard, he said in a tone of genuine affront. She told you, Rosa said. I thought she was being modest. He set the phone on the side table. How is the therapist? Good, Rosa said. First appointment Thursday, Sophia's room if she's still here. Dr. Wells prefers to meet patients in their current environment first. She sat down in the second chair. She also said, and I agreed with this, that it would help if Sophia got to choose how to tell the story, not have it told to her. The doctor will guide her toward it, but on Sophia's terms. Marco nodded. He looked at his daughter. She's going to be angry, he said. When it really settles, past the fear, she's going to be very angry. Yes, Rosa said. She's earned that. I know. He was quiet. I hope she's angry at me too. She should be. I wasn't paying attention to the right things. Rosa said nothing for a moment. Then she said, you can't fix the 11 months, but you can be in that chair when she wakes up. And the next time she wakes up, and the time after that. Marco looked at her. Is that the standard you're holding me to? Just being present? It's the standard she's holding you to, Rosa said. Listen to her when she tells you what she needs. She's very clear about it for a 7-year-old. She just needs to know someone is listening. He accepted that. He settled back in the chair and the room was quiet, and outside the window, the afternoon was moving toward early evening and the city was doing what cities do. Indifferent and continuous and full of people who had no idea that in room 414 of this hospital, a small broken thing was very slowly beginning to mend. 2 hours later, Sophia woke up. She looked at the chair, first checking the way children do when the most important thing is whether the person they were promised is still there, and Marco was in it. And when she saw him, her whole body relaxed in a single visible wave. You stayed, she said. I stayed, he said. She looked at Rosa. You too. Me too, Rosa said. Sophia looked between them for a moment with her serious, watchful eyes. Then she said, are you going to stay like after? Are you both going to be there? Marco said, yes. Rosa said, yes. Sophia looked at her hands in her lap. I don't want to go back to the house, she said quietly. Not right away, it feels, she searched for the word. It feels like the air is wrong there. We'll fix the air, Marco said. Whatever you need changed, we'll change it. You tell me. Sophia thought about this with characteristic seriousness. Then she said, can Rosa have a real room? Not the housekeeper rooms. A real room, near mine. Marco looked at Rosa. Rosa kept her expression even. Yes, Marco said. And can we get a dog? Sophia asked. A beat. I've been thinking about this for a while, Sophia added with the careful tone of someone who has been constructing an argument and is now deploying it. I looked it up, and dogs help people feel less scared. It's scientific. Is it scientific? Marco said. I can show you the article. You found an article? Several, Sophia said. Marco's mouth did the thing that was not quite a smile, but was everything pointing toward it. He looked at Rosa again. Rosa very deliberately looked at the window. We'll talk about this dog, Marco said. That means yes, Sophia told Rosa confidentially. I heard that, Marco said. Sophia smiled. It was the first real smile Rosa had seen on her face in 11 months, not the careful, performed smile of a child managing expectations, but a sudden, unguarded, completely alive smile. And Rosa felt it in her sternum, like a bell being struck. It lasted only a moment. Then Sophia's face went serious again, and she said, Rosa, the thing with Grandma, did she ever actually love me? Or was I just... She stopped, couldn't find the shape of the rest of the question. Rosa leaned forward. She took Sophia's hand. I think, she said carefully, that is exactly the kind of question that you and Dr. Wells are going to work through together. Because it deserves more than a quick answer. It deserves real time and real thought and someone who can help you carry it. But what do you think? Sophia pressed. Right now, just what do you think? Rosa looked at the child's face. At the need in it, the honest, raw 7-year-old need to understand the thing that had happened to her in language that made some kind of sense. She said, I think some people are so broken inside that they can't love anyone properly even when they want to. And I think that is their failure, not yours. It has never been yours. She squeezed the small hand. And I think the people in this room right now love you in a way that is real and whole and not broken at all. And that's what you build on. That's the ground under your feet. Sophia looked at her for a long time. Then she looked at Marco. Marco said very quietly, she's right. Sophia absorbed this. She nodded once slowly like someone filing something important in a place where it wouldn't get lost. Then she lay back against her pillow and said, I'm hungry. Marco laughed. It was a short, surprised, completely genuine laugh, the kind that escapes before a person can decide whether to let it, and it changed the air in the room entirely. Rosa stood and called the nurse for the sealed meal protocol, and the evening moved forward the way evenings do when the worst is genuinely over, slowly, ordinarily, full of small needs and simple answers. 3 days later, Sophia was discharged. Carmen Vidal, who had spent those 3 days in a safe house arranged by Caruso with a healing arm, and 14 months of documentation finally out of her hands, received a call from Marco directly. Rosa didn't know exactly what was said, but she knew that Carmen was offered a position, not in the house, but adjacent to it, something that used the particular skills she had demonstrated over 14 months of careful watching, something that acknowledged what she had risked. Carmen took it. Thomas Reed's federal case moved forward with the kind of speed that suggested the prosecution had been waiting a long time for exactly this evidence. Rosa read about it in fragments and news alerts on her phone. Financial advisor, charged documents, seized cooperative witness, cited, and she understood that Caruso's role in this had dimensions she was never going to have full visibility into, and she accepted that. Donna Elena left the city on a Thursday morning. Rosa was not told when or how. She came down to the kitchen to start Sophia's breakfast, and one of the security men said simply, "The East Wing is empty." And Rosa nodded and turned back to the eggs. She didn't feel what she had expected to feel. Not relief exactly, not satisfaction. Something more like the specific quiet that settles into a room after a very long noise has finally stopped an absence so complete it takes a moment to identify what used to fill the space. She cracked the eggs and thought about 11 months of watching a child get sick and saying nothing, and then one night saying something in the distance between those two things and what had lived in that distance. She thought about her own daughter, 23 years old in another city, and picked up her phone and sent a text that said, "Only thinking of you. Call me this week if you can." The response came in 4 minutes, a voice note laughing, saying, "Mom, I literally called you 2 days ago." And Rosa stood in the kitchen with a laugh rising in her own chest and let it come. Sophia found her that way, still smiling at her phone. "What's funny?" Sophia asked. She was in her pajamas, which were patterned with small yellow dogs, a fact that Rosa suspected was not coincidental. "My daughter," Rosa said. "She thinks I don't call enough." Sophia climbed onto the kitchen stool and considered this. "How often do you call?" "Twice a week." "That's not enough," Sophia said with complete authority. "You should call every day." "Is that so, Theo?" "Yes, when I grow up and move away." She said it with the casual confidence of a child for whom growing up is now again a thing that will happen, a future that exists. "I'm going to want my dad to call every day." Rosa looked at her, at this child who had spent 11 months being slowly diminished and had come through it with her directness intact, her intelligence intact, her stubborn and endearing conviction that the people who loved her should show up fully, consistently, without excuses. "Then you should tell him that," Rosa said. "Sophia said I already did this morning, before he left." She paused. "He said he'd try. I told him, try isn't good enough. He said, okay, every day." "You negotiated him." "I learned from watching you," Sophia said. Rosa set the eggs on the plate and slid it across the counter, and felt the full weight of the past days, all of it, the fear and the fury, in the 11 months of watching, and the long night of deciding, and the moment in the ambulance when she had held a small, unconscious child and made a promise with no words, and every intention felt it settle into something she had no name for but recognized. Sophia picked up her fork. She looked at the plate. Then she looked at Rosa with those dark, searching, completely present eyes and said, "You tasted it right." She said it without irony, without performance. She said it the way someone says a thing that is simply true, a new fact of life, a new condition of the world, something to be acknowledged and moved forward from. Rosa said, "I tasted it." Sophia nodded. She picked up a bite of egg. She ate. And that, Rosa thought, not the arrests, not the documents, not the carefully negotiated terms of a dangerous woman's removal from the board. That right here, this child lifting a fork without fear, eating breakfast in her own kitchen on an ordinary morning with the sun coming in and the day beginning and nothing lurking in the food or the silence or the careful smile of a woman who called it quality control. That was what it had all been for. Rosa turned back to the counter and made herself a cup of coffee and stood in the kitchen of a house that was finally genuinely beginning to be safe. And she thought sometimes the most important thing a person can do is notice. Notice the wrong thing, the quiet thing, the thing everyone else has decided is not their business. Notice it and refuse to look away. She had been invisible in other people's houses for 20 years. She had learned to see everything from invisible. This time what she saw had mattered. This time what she saw had saved a life. And no one, not a grandmother with pearls and patience, not an accountant with 20 years of trust to spend, not a household full of people paid to look the other way, no one had been able to stop a woman with $11 an hour in a notebook and the simple, unshakable conviction that a child deserved better. Rosa drank her coffee. Sophia finished her breakfast. The morning held.